Steven Seagal had worked at Harborline Auto Services, a busy repair shop in a quiet coastal town, for nearly 2 years. Most customers respected him, a calm, disciplined man who rarely spoke more than necessary. But to his boss, Martin Ricks, Steven was nothing more than an employee who worked too slow, too quietly, and too independently. That morning, the sky was still gray when Steven arrived early, as usual. He had barely started inspecting an engine when he heard the squeal of tires outside, followed by a loud, sharp crash. Steven looked up instantly. A police cruiser had collided with a delivery truck at the intersection across the street. Without hesitation, Steven dropped his tools and rushed out. Inside the cruiser, a policewoman lay slumped over the wheel, her forehead bleeding. The delivery driver looked shaken but unharmed. Can you hear me?" Steven asked as he gently checked her pulse. She blinked, dazed. I'm okay. "I think," she tried to say, but couldn't move her leg, pinned by the twisted dashboard. Steven acted quickly. He braced his hands on the metal frame and pushed, using all of his strength. After a few moments of effort, he managed to free her leg. He carried her to the side of the road, keeping her conscious until paramedics arrived. People gathered, murmuring in shock and gratitude. The paramedics thanked Steven sincerely. But Martin, who had followed Steven outside, wasn't impressed. Instead, he was furious. "Where the hell were you?" he barked the moment Steven stepped back into the shop. "There was an accident. She was injured." "I had to help," Steven replied calmly. "You're not a hero," Martin snapped. "You're my employee. And you abandoned your job without permission." Steven stared at him, unable to believe what he was hearing. "You're fired," Martin said sharply, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Pack your things and get out." The entire workshop fell silent. Steven didn't argue. He simply wiped his hands, gathered his few tools, and walked out the door, but not before several co-workers whispered apologies, knowing what had happened was wrong. What Steven didn't know was that the policewoman he had saved wasn't just any officer. And the next morning, 10 patrol cars would be outside his house, not to arrest him, but for something far more shocking. Steven Seagal lived in a modest wooden house at the edge of town, surrounded by tall pine trees and the sound of the ocean wind rolling in from the coast. That morning, he woke up earlier than usual. His mind was still replaying yesterday's events, the accident, the injured policewoman, and the cold, ruthless way Martin had fired him. Steven wasn't the type to complain or seek revenge. He believed that good deeds didn't need recognition. He had done what any decent person should do. Still, losing his job weighed heavily on him. He made himself tea and stepped outside onto the porch. That's when he froze. Down the road, emerging slowly through the misty morning air, came a line of police cars. Not one. Not two. 10. Their headlights glowed pale in the fog, engines humming in a synchronized rhythm that felt almost ceremonial. They approached quietly, stopping in a neat formation in front of Steven's house. For a moment, Steven wondered whether this was some kind of mistake, or worse, if someone had misunderstood what happened yesterday. He stood still, hands relaxed at his sides, calm but alert. The car doors opened. Officers stepped out, not with weapons drawn, but standing tall, respectful, almost formal. Then the back door of the lead cruiser opened, and the injured policewoman from yesterday stepped out carefully, her leg wrapped but her eyes bright and determined. She walked toward him with the support of 2 fellow officers. "Mr. Seagal," she said softly, "we're sorry to come unannounced. But we had to see you." Steven nodded once. "Is everything all right?" She smiled warmly. "Because of you." Behind her, the officers lined up in 2 rows, hands clasped behind their backs, watching silently. "My name is Officer Dana Hartley," she continued. "And I owe you my life." "You don't owe me anything," Steven said. "I only did what anyone should have done." "No," she said firmly, her voice trembling with emotion. "Nobody else ran to help. You did. Even before anyone understood the situation." One of the senior officers stepped forward, a tall man with silver hairs brushed neatly back. "I'm Captain Reeves," he said. "Officer Hartley here is one of our department's best, and the daughter of Deputy Chief Marion Hartley." Steven raised an eyebrow slightly but remained silent. "When the chief learned what you did," Captain Reeves continued, "he ordered us to come thank you personally. He wanted you to know your actions did not go unnoticed." The officers around them nodded. Dana Hartley stepped closer. "Yesterday, when the paramedics checked me, they said if you hadn't freed my leg that quickly, I might have suffered permanent nerve damage, or worse." Steven exhaled slowly. "I'm glad you're all right," She looked around at the officers, then back at him. But we're not just here to thank you. Stephen waited. Captain Reeves cleared his throat. We also heard you were fired for helping Officer Hartley. Stephen didn't respond. His silence confirmed it. The captain's jaw clenched. We spoke with witnesses. Your boss publicly humiliated you for doing the right thing. We already filed a report against the workshop for unsafe working conditions and employee misconduct. The place is shut down for inspection. Stephen blinked, surprised, though he didn't show it. More importantly, Reeves continued, Deputy Chief Hartley instructed us to extend an offer. Dana smiled. Our department needs someone like you. Someone fast-thinking, steady, disciplined, and brave. We want to offer you a position as a tactical support specialist. Stephen looked at her, genuinely taken aback. I'm a mechanic. Not yesterday, she said. Yesterday you were a protector. The other officers murmured in agreement. Stephen took a deep breath, weighing the proposal. It wasn't just a job, it was a responsibility. A path. A calling. But why so many police cars? Stephen finally asked, glancing at the long line of patrol vehicles. Dana grinned. That wasn't my idea. That was my father's. He said, send the whole team. The man saved my daughter. He deserves a hero's welcome. Stephen shook his head with a small, amused smile. I'm not a hero. Heroes never think they are, the captain replied. One of the officers stepped forward with a small box. This is from Deputy Chief Hartley. He wanted you to have it. Stephen opened it. Inside was a polished silver badge, not official, but engraved with words. To the man who stood when others froze. Stephen stared at it quietly. Dana softened her voice. You won't have to decide right now. But we wanted you to know, you're not alone. And what you did mattered. Stephen looked at the officers, at their sincerity, their gratitude, and at Dana, who was alive because of a choice he didn't even think twice about. For the first time in a long while, he felt something shift in his chest, a sense of purpose, of direction. Thank you, he said finally. All of you. The officers smiled. As the police cars slowly drove away, leaving the road quiet again, Stephen stood on his porch holding the engraved badge. His life had changed overnight. And this was only the beginning. The rest of the day felt strangely quiet after the line of patrol cars disappeared down the road. Steven Seagal stood inside his living room, the engraved silver badge resting in his palm. He wasn't usually shaken by anything, not danger, not chaos, not change. But this stirred something deep inside him. He placed the badge gently on the table and sat down, rubbing his forehead. So much had happened in the span of 24 hours. A normal man might have been overwhelmed, but Stephen had never considered himself normal. He simply wasn't built that way. Still, there was one thing that weighed on him. Martin. The way the workshop owner had fired him replayed in Stephen's mind. The disgust in the man's voice. The casual cruelty. The loud, humiliating words spoken in front of the entire shop, as if helping an injured woman was some kind of betrayal. Stephen didn't regret what he had done, he would do it again without hesitation. But he knew the town was small, and rumors traveled fast. Losing a job was more than losing income. It meant losing stability, routine, and a sense of direction. As he pondered everything, a knock echoed through the house. Stephen looked up sharply. Another visitor? He walked to the door and opened it. Standing outside was his neighbor, Mrs. Delgado, a kind older woman who ran a small bakery down the road. She looked breathless. Stephen? I heard about what you did yesterday. Stephen raised an eyebrow. News travels fast. She placed a hand over her heart. I saw the police cars this morning too. 10 cars. I thought you were in trouble at first. Stephen chuckled lightly. Not this time. Her eyes softened. You saved a life. I know people are talking about you losing your job, but I want you to know something, this community is on your side. Stephen nodded, genuinely touched. She handed him a warm loaf of bread wrapped in cloth. This is for you. I baked it this morning. And if you need anything at all, you come to me, okay? He accepted it with quiet gratitude. Thank you, Maria. She smiled and left, shuffling down the path. As Stephen stepped back inside, he felt the warmth of the freshly baked bread in his hands, a small, simple gesture, but one that meant more than words. He placed the loaf on the counter and glanced again at the silver badge. The policeman's offer replayed in his head. A tactical support specialist. It wasn't a normal job. It wasn't a desk position. It meant field operations, crisis response, real danger, the kind he used to face in his younger days. A hidden part of him, the part that never died, felt drawn to it. But another part of him wondered if stepping into that world again would drag old shadows back to the surface. Before he could dwell on it, his phone buzzed. He picked it up. Unknown number. "Hello?" he said. "Mr. Seagal?" A man's voice responded, firm, authoritative. "This is Deputy Chief Marion Hartley." Stephen straightened slightly. "Officer Hartley's father." "Yes," the man replied. "First, I want to thank you personally for what you did for Dana. She's everything to me. And she told me you risked your life for her." "I just helped someone who needed help," Stephen said simply. "That humility," Hartley replied, "is exactly why I want you on my team." Stephen inhaled slowly. "I haven't made a decision yet." "I understand," Hartley said. "But before you decide, you should know the full picture." There was a pause. Then Hartley continued with a harder tone. "The incident at the workshop is being formally reviewed. Multiple complaints were filed about the owner even before this: unsafe practices, verbal abuse, and mishandling employees. Your firing might not have been legal." Stephen frowned. "I'm not looking for trouble." "Neither am I," Hartley said. "But I believe in fairness. And so does the department." Stephen listened silently. "I'd like to meet you tomorrow," the deputy chief said. "Talk face to face. There are things I want to discuss that can't be said over the phone." "And if I say no?" Stephen asked. "Then I still owe you a debt for saving my daughter's life," Hartley replied. "But I hope you'll hear me out." The call ended. Stephen lowered the phone and stared at the floor. The path ahead was becoming clearer, but also heavier. Fate had shifted around him overnight, and now every choice carried weight. He went outside again, letting the breeze cool his thoughts. Birds chirped from the tall pine trees, and the town's peace contradicted the storm forming around him. He knew one thing for certain. Martin wouldn't stay quiet. Men like him never did. Stephen looked down the empty road, sensing trouble long before it arrived, because trouble had a way of finding him. Have you ever been punished for doing the right thing? Tell me your experience in the comments. I'm reading each one. The next morning arrived with an uneasy stillness. Steven Seagal woke before sunrise, unable to shake the weight of yesterday's encounters. The offer from the deputy chief kept replaying in his head, and although Stephen had remained calm, he felt a storm gathering beneath the surface. He stepped outside, inhaling the crisp morning air. The world was quiet, too quiet. Even the usual hum of early traffic seemed absent. Stephen's instincts sharpened. Something was off. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the silence speak. Years of discipline had taught him to trust the tension in the air. It was rarely wrong. And he was right again. As he opened his eyes, he saw a figure approaching from down the road, a man walking with a determined pace and a stiff posture. It was Martin, the workshop owner. Stephen remained still, neither welcoming nor avoiding him. Martin stopped several feet away, his eyes red and filled with fury. "So," Martin spat, "now you're some kind of town hero?" Stephen didn't respond. He simply looked at him. "That stunt you pulled, having the police shut down my workshop." Martin continued. "You think I don't know it was because of you?" Stephen's voice was steady and low. "I filed nothing against you." "Oh, don't play innocent." Martin barked. "The police showed up at my place yesterday. They said there were complaints." "Lies. All lies." Stephen remained unfazed. "Whatever they found, is between you and them." Martin stepped closer, pointing a trembling finger at him. "You ruined my business. My reputation. My life." "I didn't ruin anything," Stephen said. "You did that on your own." Martin's face twisted in anger. "You think saving that cop makes you a saint? Let me tell you something, nobody in this town cares who you are. They tolerate you. A washed-up mechanic with a dark past. You think you're better than the rest of us." Stephen didn't flinch. "You're angry because I helped someone. Because I didn't listen to your cruelty. That's not my problem." Martin's jaw clenched. "This isn't over, Seagal." Stephen could see the desperation in his eyes, a man who felt power slipping through his fingers and needed someone to blame. Men like Martin always looked for targets they thought were weaker. But Steven Seagal was anything but weak. Before Martin could spit another insult, a car pulled up on the road, a sleek black sedan. It parked near the curb, and the door opened. Out stepped Deputy Chief Marion Hartley. Stephen's eyes narrowed slightly. Martin's face dropped. Hartley walked toward them with the quiet authority of a man who didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. "Mr. Delgado," Hartley said, addressing Martin with icy composure. "Your workshop is under investigation for multiple safety violations, not because of Mr. Seagal, but because of the evidence we found on site." Martin's eyes widened. "Evidence? You planted?" "No," Hartley cut him off calmly. "We found burned wiring, illegal disposal of chemicals, falsified repair receipts, and reports of employee harassment." Martin opened his mouth but found no words. Hartley stepped even closer. "And before you accuse Mr. Seagal again, know this: several former employees have already come forward with statements." Martin's face hardened. "They're lying." Hartley's voice became dangerously soft. "Lie detectors will decide that." Stephen quietly watched the exchange, saying nothing. Martin pointed at Stephen again. "This is all because of him. Before he came along, everything was fine." Hartley shook his head. "No, Mr. Delgado. Things were wrong long before he stepped into your workshop. He just happened to be the first person brave enough to act differently." Martin's anger reached a breaking point. "He helped a cop. That's why you're protecting him." Hartley's expression tightened. "He saved my daughter's life." Martin's breath caught. The truth landed harder than any punch. "You fired him for helping her," Hartley continued. "So yes, I take that personally." Stephen saw Martin's expression collapse from rage into fear. The fight left him. He turned around and marched away, muttering foul words under his breath, disappearing down the road. Only when Martin was far enough did Hartley turn to Stephen. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that," the deputy chief said. Stephen shrugged. "I can handle him." "I know," Hartley replied. "But this situation isn't just about him. Something else is happening behind the scenes, and you're in the middle of it now." Stephen frowned. "What do you mean?" Hartley opened the car door, gesturing for Stephen to join him. "Come with me. There's something I need to show you." Stephen hesitated. Then nodded. He stepped into the car, and Hartley slid into the driver's seat. As the sedan pulled away from his house, Stephen looked out the window at the quiet street, knowing full well that whatever waited ahead was much bigger than a disgruntled workshop owner. He wasn't returning to his old life. He was being pulled into a new one that demanded everything he thought he had left behind. The drive was silent at first. Deputy Chief Hartley kept his eyes on the road, his jaw tight, as though rehearsing the words he needed to say. Steven Seagal sat calmly in the passenger seat, one hand resting on his knee, the other lightly tapping the door, a subtle habit he had when calculating risk. They drove past the town square, past the closed workshop that still had bright yellow under investigation tape wrapped around the entrances, past the quiet cafe where locals gathered each morning. Stephen noticed everything. And he noticed one more thing too. They weren't heading toward the police station. They were going out of town. Into the woods. He finally broke the silence. "You going to tell me where we're headed?" Hartley exhaled. "A place that isn't on any official report." Stephen arched an eyebrow. "Sounds off the record." "It is," Hartley admitted. "And you need to see it." Stephen nodded once, signaling he was listening. Hartley tightened his grip on the wheel. "Look, the situation yesterday was bigger than you know." Stephen stayed quiet, letting him continue. "My daughter," Hartley said, voice softening, "she wasn't just in a random accident." Stephen's attention sharpened. "She was targeted." Stephen turned his head. "By who?" "That's the problem," Hartley said. "We don't know. Not yet." The car turned down a narrow forest road, the sunlight breaking through the branches like golden shards. The air grew colder, quieter, heavier. Hartley continued. "Dana was investigating illegal weapons trafficking connected to a much larger operation. She didn't tell many people, even inside the department. But someone knew. Someone dangerous. So they staged the accident." Stephen asked. Hartley nodded. "Or forced it." Stephen absorbed this. "And you think that whoever did it saw her survive?" "Yes. And now they're watching." Hartley swallowed hard. "That's my fear." They reached a metal gate. Hartley punched in a code, and it opened slowly, creaking as if it hadn't been used in years. Beyond it was an old storage facility, rusted but still standing. Hartley parked the car and stepped out. Stephen followed him into the building. Inside, the air was musty but cool. On the far wall hung a large board covered with photographs, documents, maps, an entire investigation laid out like a puzzle with missing pieces. And in the middle, a picture of Stephen. Stephen stared at it, then at Hartley. Hartley raised his hands defensively. I didn't put that there. That's why I brought you. Stephen stepped closer, studying the wall. His photo was pinned next to Dana's, connected by red string. Underneath his name was written, "Interfered." Beneath that, "Possible threat." Stephen's eyes narrowed. "This was here before you brought me?" he asked. Hartley nodded. "I found it this morning. Someone broke into this storage unit. Someone who knew about Dana's case." Stephen studied the layout carefully. Whoever set this up wasn't sloppy. The handwriting was consistent, the photo angle recent, the ink fresh. This wasn't old. This was active surveillance. "Why me?" Stephen asked quietly. Hartley took a breath. "I was hoping you had an answer." Stephen stared at the board, piecing together details. A hit attempt on Dana. A break-in at a classified investigation site. A wall connecting her to him. He didn't like unanswered questions. He turned to Hartley. "You said she was targeted because of what she was investigating." "Yes." "And I helped her survive." "Yes." Stephen took a slow, deliberate breath. "Then the people who wanted her dead probably think I ruined their plan." Hartley nodded. "Exactly." Stephen continued. "So they're looking at me now." "Most likely. And they think I'm involved with her case." "That's my fear," Hartley said. Stephen studied the board again. "If they think I know something, they might come after you next," Hartley finished. Stephen remained completely still. No fear. No surprise. Just the slow recognition of an old, familiar enemy. Violence in the shadows. The kind he had faced many times before. Hartley rubbed his forehead. "I didn't want to drag you into this. I just wanted to thank you. But the moment those photos appeared, I realized you're already in it." Stephen spoke in a calm, grounded voice. "Who else knows about this place?" "Only 2 officers," Hartley said. "Officers I trust." Stephen nodded. "Trust can be broken." Hartley sighed heavily. "I know." Stephen paced slowly, examining the board again, analyzing every detail with surgical precision. The suspect's photos, the crime routes, the smuggling trails, all pointing toward a larger operation. Finally, he turned to Hartley. "You said you wanted me on your team," Stephen said. "Now I understand why." "Yes," Hartley admitted. "Because you've already become part of this story." Stephen took in a deep breath. Helping Dana hadn't just cost him his job. It had put a target on his back. Hartley's voice softened. "I'm asking you again, Stephen, join us. Not because you owe us anything, but because we need someone like you. Someone who doesn't scare easy. Someone they can't intimidate." Stephen looked at the photo of Dana, then at his own photo labeled "Possible Threat." Then he spoke. "I don't run from danger." Hartley nodded with relief. "And I don't like being hunted." "Then fight with us," Hartley said. "Help us finish what Dana started." Stephen stepped closer, his voice calm but filled with iron. "I'll join." Hartley smiled, not with joy, but with the grim satisfaction of a man who knew a storm had just gained its strongest weapon. The ride back from the hidden investigation facility was darker, heavier, almost suffocating. Even the air felt different, charged, as if the forest itself sensed something brewing beneath the surface. Steven Seagal sat in the passenger seat again, this time silent for a different reason. Not confusion. Not fear. Calculation. He replayed the board in his mind, the red strings, the faces of unknown criminals, the routes, the smuggling operations, and his own photo marked as a possible threat. Whoever had pinned his picture on that board wasn't just watching him. They had studied him. They knew things. Things only an experienced observer or trained operative would notice. Deputy Chief Hartley cleared his throat. "There's more you should know." Stephen looked at him out of the corner of his eye. Hartley continued, 3 days ago, before the accident, Dana told me she felt she was being followed. A black SUV. Windows tinted. No plates. Stephen nodded slowly. Professional operation. Exactly, Hartley agreed. And after yesterday, after you stepped in, that same SUV was spotted near your house. Stephen didn't react outwardly, but his pulse sharpened. "They're watching you," Hartley added. Stephen exhaled slowly. "Let them watch." Hartley tapped the steering wheel nervously. "This isn't a street thug situation. These people, They're connected. Organized. Dangerous. Men who don't get nervous. Men who don't make mistakes. Stephen finally spoke. Everybody makes mistakes. And what mistake do you think they're making? Hartley asked. Stephen's eyes narrowed. Thinking I'm just a mechanic. Hartley let out a short breath, half laugh, half disbelief. As they approached Stephen's house, something immediately felt wrong. The road was too quiet. The driveway had fresh tire marks. And the front door, Stephen's solid oak door, was slightly open. Hartley's heart raced. Stay in the car. Stephen was already out. He walked toward the house with slow, controlled steps. Nothing rushed. Nothing careless. The door creaked as he pushed it open. Inside, the living room lights were on, though he had switched them off before leaving. His instincts flared. Someone had been inside. Someone still could be. Hartley followed him cautiously, hand on his holster. We should call backup. No, Stephen said. They were here. They're gone now. Hartley frowned. How do you know? Stephen pointed to the window. The curtain moved. Air pressure shift. Someone exited through the back moments ago. Hartley looked stunned. You saw that? Stephen didn't answer. He moved deeper into the living room. Nothing was stolen. Nothing broken. But something was different. Something subtle. Something off. Then he saw it. On the table. Right next to the silver badge the officers gave him. A single item. A bullet. Polished. New. Placed deliberately. Hartley stepped beside him and froze. Oh God. Stephen picked up the bullet and studied it calmly. They're not subtle, Stephen said. This is a message. Hartley clenched his fists. A threat. Stephen looked him in the eyes. No. A warning. They want me to back off. They want you to panic. And what do you want to do? Hartley asked. Stephen placed the bullet back on the table, his voice low and controlled. I want to meet them. Suddenly, the backyard motion light flicked on. Both men turned instantly. Stephen moved first, rushing toward the back door, but by the time he stepped outside, the intruder was already fleeing into the tree line. A shadowy figure, fast, trained, agile. Stephen sprinted after him. Hartley shouted, Wait! Stephen ignored him. His feet pounded against the ground as he closed the distance. The figure darted between trees, moving in sharp, tactical patterns, zigzagging, using the darkness, using cover. But Stephen had hunted men like him before. The forest floor crackled with leaves as Stephen caught up enough to see the intruder clearly, dressed in black, a hood over his head, and something glinting at his side. A weapon. Stop. Stephen commanded. The man didn't stop. Instead, he turned his head briefly, and Stephen caught a glimpse of cold, calculating eyes. Eyes that knew Stephen. And feared him. The man sprinted, faster now, desperate to escape. Stephen pushed harder, but the intruder reached a motorcycle hidden behind the trees. He kicked it alive with one motion and sped away into the night, the engine roaring like an animal. Stephen stopped, watching the taillight disappear. Hartley finally caught up, panting. You okay? Stephen nodded slowly. I saw his eyes. And? Stephen turned, his face hardening like steel. His not local. His trained. Hartley swallowed. Which means Dana's case is bigger than we thought. Stephen looked toward the dark tree line. It means they're willing to kill to protect it. Hartley breathed out. Then we'll fight. Stephen's voice dropped even lower. No. I'll fight. You keep your daughter safe. Hartley shook his head. You're part of this now. Whether you like it or not. Stephen didn't deny it. The shadow. The bullet. The surveillance board. The war had already begun. And Seagal was done running. If you were in Stephen's place, and someone left a bullet inside your home, what would you do? Comment below. I'm reading all your thoughts. The morning after the storm felt eerily quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Seagal sat at the edge of his bed, elbows on his knees, staring at the sunlight creeping through the blinds. It should have felt like a peaceful start to the day. But after a night of sirens, flashing lights, and officers stationed outside his home like guardians, or warnings, peace was the last thing he felt. He replayed the previous night in his mind, the knock on the door, the announcement of the raid, the sudden shift when the commanding officer recognized him, the apology, the explanation, the unexpected respect. It all felt unreal, even for someone who had lived a life as intense and unpredictable as his. But now, as he sat in the quiet of his room, he felt something deeper stirring, a question he had avoided for years. How long could he keep pretending he was just a mechanic? He exhaled, rubbing his temples. Everything was changing. Fast. Downstairs, he heard voices. Calm, controlled, authoritative. Police officers still inside? He frowned and stood, making his way down the hallway. When he reached the living room, he found Lieutenant Ryan Coleman, the officer who had apologized to him the night before. He stood near the couch, holding a folder, his expression serious but respectful. Two other officers waited quietly behind him. Stephen crossed his arms. Didn't expect a follow-up visit this early. Coleman offered a small, tight smile. I figured you'd want answers. Real answers. Stephen gestured for him to speak. Coleman opened the folder. You were targeted because someone filed an anonymous tip accusing you of harboring illegal weapons and obstructing law enforcement. It triggered the automatic response protocol, hence the raid. Stephen raised a brow. Anonymous. Of course. Coleman hesitated. We traced the source. Stephen leaned forward slightly. Let me guess, my boss. Yeah, Coleman said quietly. Mr. Grayson. Stephen chuckled, a low, humorless sound. Fired me for helping a bleeding policewoman, then tried to get me arrested. That man's dedication to being garbage is impressive. Coleman didn't smile. It goes deeper. Grayson told the department you were a danger, that you had a violent past, that you were connected to criminal networks. He painted a picture that made you look like a ticking time bomb. Stephen's expression didn't change, but a cold stillness settled in his eyes. So he wanted me destroyed. Professionally, and personally. Coleman nodded. And he almost succeeded. But the moment we saw who you really were, everything changed. Stephen sighed. That's exactly what I didn't want. Coleman closed the folder. Mr. Seagal, you can't hide forever. Not from your past. And not from the respect you earned. Stephen walked toward the window, looking outside at the patrol cars that were still stationed there. So what now? You expect me to come back? Put on the badge again? Coleman stepped forward. No. I expect you to make a choice. Stephen turned to face him. Coleman continued, you saved Officer Vargas's life. Then you stood your ground when the system turned against you. Our department needs people like you, not as a symbol, not as a celebrity, but as someone who actually knows what integrity looks like. Stephen didn't answer. He crossed the room, opened the fridge, and pulled out a bottle of water. His silence wasn't avoidance, it was contemplation. Finally, he spoke. I left that world because I got tired of politics disguised as justice. Coleman nodded. I won't pretend it's better now. But I'm offering you something else. Stephen raised an eyebrow. Which is? Coleman took out an official-looking card and placed it on the table. A special consultancy position. No uniform. No chain of command. No bureaucratic nonsense. You come in when you want, advise when you choose, act when it matters. Because like it or not, Mr. Seagal, people still look up to you. Stephen stared at the card. So this is what all the lights and noise were leading to, huh? A job offer? Coleman's tone softened. No. Last night was a mistake. This is a recognition. Stephen picked up the card and rotated it slowly between his fingers. And what about Grayson? He asked. He tried to set me up. He lied to your department. He endangered an officer by firing the only person who stopped to help her. Does he just walk away? Coleman exchanged a look with the other officers. That's the second reason we're here. He handed Stephen a sealed envelope. Inside were documents, statements, screenshots, audio transcripts, evidence of everything Grayson had done to target him. We're opening an investigation, Coleman said firmly. And we'd like your cooperation. But with or without you, this man is going to face consequences. Stephen let the papers fall onto the table. So the hunter becomes the hunted. Coleman nodded. Poetic, isn't it? Stephen smirked, a rare, genuine smirk. For several moments, silence filled the room. Heavy, thoughtful, electric. Then Stephen looked up. You said I have a choice. Here it is. Coleman waited. Stephen's voice was calm, but resolute. I'll help. I'll consult. I'll lend my experience when it counts. But I won't wear a badge. And I won't take orders. If I step in, I do it my way. Coleman's relief was visible. That's exactly what we were hoping for. As the officers began to leave, Coleman paused at the door. One more thing. Officer Vargas wants to thank you personally. When she recovers enough to walk, she'll come by. She insisted. Stephen nodded. I'll be here. The door closed. Stephen stood alone in his quiet house, but he no longer felt the weight of solitude. Something new had settled in the space around him. Not fear. Not anger. Purpose. His life as a mechanic was over. His life as the man who ran from his past was over. And the next chapter, whatever it looked like, was already on its way.